The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 198.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Welcome back to the EL. Today we have Elizabeth Thornton, author of The Objective Leader, How to Leverage the Power of Seeing Things as They Are. Welcome, Elizabeth, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
I'm delighted to be here, Wade. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Before we take a deep dive into your book, The Objective Leader, will you take just a moment to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you personally.
Sure. My name is Elizabeth Thornton. I've been with Babson College as a professor of entrepreneurship since 2006. And interestingly, I started teaching entrepreneurship in the classes. You know, a lot of our cases at Babson's #1 in the world in entrepreneurship education. And so many of the cases that we talked about and studied in those classes were about, entrepreneurs that actually succeeded, and they cashed out, they harvested the venture, they cashed out, and they're on some island somewhere. But the reality is, 1 out of 6, 60% of businesses fail within their first 5 years. That's the latest GEM report data. And so why don't we teach students another view of it? What does failure really look like, and what do you get up from? How do you get up from that? And how do you rethink failure? And what do you learn from failure? And so I actually, and I guess the inspiration behind the book was I had lost $1 million, which was not a fun thing, Wade, in an international fruit juice business. And I decided to write a case about it and start teaching it at Babson. So that's kind of been and from there, I developed the principles of objectivity to help entrepreneurs not do what I did, which was not be very objective about their ventures.
Wow, that's extremely powerful. And thank you for sharing that. And now let's jump into your book that we were just discussing, The Objective Leader, How to Leverage the Power of Seeing Things as They Are, right. Which was first made available for purchase back not that long ago, actually last month, February 10th, 2015. Yeah. And Elizabeth, we're going to move quickly. Okay. But our whole goal here today is to cover the top questions that our listener / future reader would like to get answered.
Right.
And the first one is, what was the inspiration behind writing The Objective Leader?
Well, as I was saying, I lost $1 million in an international fruit juice business, and it taught me so much. I guess sometimes when you crash and burn so badly that you have two choices, to stay down or you get up and learn from your mistakes. And I kind of got up, but it wasn't after many months on the couch doing the whole, movie marathon Haagen-Dazs ice cream thing, because I had failed for the first time in my life. And here I was, this very successful person, and all of a sudden I crashed and burned and lost this business. And so getting back on my feet, I realized that it wasn't the business decisions I was making along the way. It was kind of how I framed my world. It was my inherent subjectivity. It was the fact that we all kind of don't see things clearly. We overreact to situations. We often think the worst. We take things personally. We care how we're being perceived. We judge people unfairly. This is what we do. This is a cognitive thing that we all do. And that, I learned, was the more of the reason behind my failure than anything else was my inherent subjectivity, my inability to see things as they were. And so as a result of that, I started studying psychology and neuroscience and leadership and entrepreneurship. And I hadn't been a professor yet at that time, and just trying to put it all together to see, how can, it's not just me, because when I do my workshops now, it's hysterical because I ask the people in the class, I say, how many people have ever overreacted to a situation? And the whole room raises their hand. Wait, this is what we do. And the problem is it can result in bad business decisions. And an entrepreneur, when things are moving so fast, we really can't afford that. So, and so I learned so much. I learned that I was too defined by the role of me as an entrepreneur, and that's a huge thing that entrepreneurs do. We think it's our baby. In my fruit juice venture, they were calling me the fruit juice lady. Now, can you really be objective about your business if they're calling you your business? Nah, maybe not so much. Your ability to collaborate effectively is directly related to your ability to be objective. If you care about how you're being perceived all the time, how objective are you going to be about your relationships with your suppliers, your employees, all of that? And so when I started piecing all this together, it was my inherent subjectivity that cost me $1 million. And I didn't want to do that again. And I started learning about objectivity and developed this course around it that I started teaching at Babson. In actually 2008, I developed the course. And my students loved it. It's one of the highest ranking classes at Babson. And now I teach it at Exec Ed to corporations because it's now considered a core competency for effective leadership, just the ability to see things as they are. And then finally, my students kept telling me, please write the book. And so that's the inspiration behind the book, Wade. It was my own experience trying to get off the couch and learning a lot about what we all do and learning how to do it less so that we can be more effective, make better decisions, and have our ventures grow and thrive.
Perfect. So, Elizabeth, we were talking beforehand about how many books come out for entrepreneurs every single month. So this next question is so relevant on helping find that needle in the haystack. And that's, what makes your book different from others regarding the same or similar topic?
Well, you know what? I think, and it's so interesting because I've been at Babson since 2006. So it's been a while. And so many of the books are about kind of the process of entrepreneurship. And actually, we even think of it in terms of a way of thinking and acting. An entrepreneurial way of thinking and acting. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to the entrepreneur, who that entrepreneur is. And so a lot of the books talk about the process, how you evaluate your assumptions, how you validate your assumptions, looking at things like, looking at a business model canvas, and you're looking at a business model map, and you're looking at your unique value proposition, and you're looking at your most viable product, you're looking at channels and customer experience, infrastructure, you're looking at all that. And all the books focus on that. And that's excellent, and it's so well needed. But what's behind how you interpret what you're reading and how you assimilate that information has a direct relation to who that entrepreneur is, how they frame their world, and ultimately how clearly they see things, right? And how clearly they're able to judge situations and take effective action. And that's what my book does. So it talks about the entrepreneur, it's him or herself, their mindset, and how to keep them clear in their mindset so that they can make better decisions along the way.
Perfect. And Elizabeth, how did you write the book, or how did you design it to be read? Did you really, can a reader jump in and jump out based on the information they need at that moment, or did you really write it to be read from front to back?
You know what? I would say front to back, because I base the book off of the class. So, here I am with my PowerPoint slides, and okay, I say this now. And that's how I wrote the book. And it was all about having that audience, whether it's the reader or the student in the class, be able to think through these things, apply it to themselves, and actually invite them to engage in a process for them to be more objective. So at the end of every single chapter, there are exercises so that you can actually develop more objectivity. And my goal at the end of the book is for everyone to walk away with their own personal objectivity framework, ways in which they are going to change the way they think and act so that they can be more successful.
So Elizabeth, now that we know the purpose and a little bit of the background behind the book, let's take a deep dive into the content itself. So we take the next 5 to 8 minutes and really give the future reader a great idea of what they can get if they read your book.
Sure, Wade. Well, the first chapter, is all about how I lost $1 million. So, I take you through my whole experience from beginning to end. And along the way, I ask questions like, was I being objective here? Could I have seen this differently? Just to get the audience to start thinking about their thought process and to look at my thought process and think of similar situations that they might have confronted or are currently confronting. So that's fun. So that's chapter 2, because you can't say you lost $1 million and then not tell the reader how you did it. Especially an entrepreneur, they definitely want to know how you lost $1 million, right? So that's the first chapter, or that's chapter 1. And so then we jump right into chapter 2, which is all about setting the context for objectivity and subjectivity. What are we talking about when we talk about objectivity and subjectivity? And so I kind of define it. And I define objectivity is the ability to see and recognize things as they are without projecting your fears, your background, your past experience, and your mental models onto whatever it is, and responding thoughtfully, deliberately, and purposely to everything that you experience. I know that's a mouthful, but that's kind of what it is. So I kind of introduced that, and I introduced kind of some silly examples of I guess what I would call extreme examples of subjectivity, just to kind of craft it a little bit. And then most importantly, with all the classes that I've taught at Babson, I've conducted interviews with everyone who's taken a class, and I've had them all complete surveys. So over a period of 5 or 7 years, I've kind of developed the research around this, and so I share that with the reader, and I share actually, what percentage of people really do overreact every single day? How many people take things personally every day, or once a week, or every other day? So I share all that data, and my goal in sharing the data is to let people know that they are not alone. That we all do this. It's not them that's crazy. We all do this. We all read tone in email. When you read tone and you say, oh my God, what does that person mean by that email? We all do that. And so that's what chapter 2 is about, is setting the groundwork, setting the context, defining subjectivity and objectivity, and letting you know that you are not alone. Okay. And so then we go on to chapter 3. And because the first step in being objective is really about understanding how we relate to the world. So I call that the subject-object relationship. So we go into that in some bit of detail, because what we experience through our senses, right, is a person, situation, or event. All of those things that we experience through our senses is an object of our awareness, right? And we respond to whatever that is. And so the point of all that is that, as you are the subject, everything that you experience is an object of your awareness. That means that you are responsible for and drive your response to everything that you experience. And that is really, really important for people to understand. And then we talk about drivers of subjectivity. So we perceive through our senses a person, situation, or an event. And then in an instant, we project all this stuff. We make so much stuff up. You have to admit, we just make so much stuff up. And so I go through these, what I call drivers of subjectivity, the mental models. What is a mental model? What are fears? What are my emotions? What's my intuition? All these things that we can project onto what is that may color our ability to see things as they are. So I go through that part in that part of the book. And then so that kind of sets up a little bit about the brain. I don't go into a lot of detail, but a little bit about the neuroscience around it, looking at how the brain works, looking at the prefrontal cortex, the basal ganglia, what drives our automatic responses and our thoughts. Actually, it's a part of our brain. When we do things automatically, there's something that switches in our brain that takes that over. And that when we're trying to rethink things, we have to bring it to our prefrontal cortex. So that part is just a small little section of the book. I don't want to freak people out with that, but it's just a small part of the book, because it's really important to understand that it's our nature. It's the brain's nature to be subjective, is to skew things, not to skew things, but put things in boxes so that we can respond quickly. Once we do something and know how to do it, it becomes automatic, and that's how the brain works, right? We can get on a bicycle after I don't know how many years and ride a bike. And the most important thing about that is to understand neuroplasticity. Just because our brain has been wired a certain way, that the way we respond has become habitual, and it's because what's wired together fires together, right? Because of neuroplasticity, we can change the way we respond. So in effect, when you see yourself overreacting to a situation, you can find out why, and you can do it less because of the brain's neuroplasticity. So that chapter really kind of sets up the fact that, yes, we are inherently subjective. It's the nature of the brain and the mind. And number 3, we cannot do that. Neuroplasticity allows us to rewire our neural net and create new ways of responding to everything that we experience. And I think that's just the coolest thing. Okay, so chapter 4 is really about, okay, let's apply this to leadership. And it lays out a framework for increasing objectivity. Step by step, what you do when you have time to analyze a situation, what are the objective ways to approach the situation? So that whole chapter is focused on, how do I increase my objectivity? How can I bring objectivity to decision making? And it takes you through examples. And at the end of that chapter, it allows you to think through situations and do that and apply the framework. Chapter 5 is about, and it's really nice when you can sit back and say, oh, you know what? I think I have to analyze my underlying assumptions here, and I have to analyze my mental models, and I have to make sure I'm gaining input from all the diverse perspectives from all these people, and all that's fine when you have time. But with entrepreneurs, as we all know, we are constantly under pressure. And when the pressure to perform intensifies, right, we tend to draw on our past experiences, old ways of doing things, our fears, and we kind of blurt out and we react instead of really respond. And so then chapter 5 is all about being objective under pressure. So when things are really moving fast, when that email's coming in, when the supplier is screaming, the customer is screaming, whatever it is, and you want to be able to respond appropriately, what are the key tactics, tools, and tips you can use to be objective in the moment? And part of that, and I want to spend a minute on it, because if I could give you guys a takeaway before even reading the book, I'd like to do that. One is just about mindfulness. The problem with most of us is that we're not very mindful. We're never in the present moment. We're always thinking about the future. We're projecting ourselves into the past. Oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. This is what we do all day, right? And so that we're never really experiencing things in the moment. And the reason why that's a problem in terms of objectivity is, if most of the time when you're about to overreact or get angry or blow your top, you kind of know. I always say in my classes, do you know when you're about to lose your mind? And people say, yeah, I know. I get hot, my heart starts pounding, my palms get sweaty. Everyone has a physiological response to that stress they feel. And so the key to being objective in the moment is really being aware of those triggers. And those triggers are those physiological responses. So for me, while I was running around South Africa, I gave it away. The international fruit juice thing was in South Africa. When I was running around South Africa trying to save my business, I had butterflies in my stomach. I was such a wreck. But I didn't realize then, because I didn't learn objectivity then, is those triggers were assigned for me. And every time I had those butterflies, I should have stopped, right? Did the opposite of what my mind was thinking at that time. And then responded differently than what my butterflies in my stomach were causing, how they were causing me to respond. So that's really what chapter 5 is really, really focused on, is how do you be objective in the moment? So if I just do a really recap, it's the subject-object relationship, understanding that. It's about the nature of the brain and how that works and how we can be more objective. And then how do I apply this for decision making? And then now it's about how do I apply it in the moment? So the next chapter 6 is, okay, so we all have these mental models, right? And we see and respond, we think and act through these mental models. And as I said before, mental models are one of the things that we project onto what is that keeps us from seeing things as they are, right? And we have a mental model, Wade, for every role that we play. You have a mental model for what it is to be the owner of this company, to conduct these interviews. I have a mental model of what it is to be a woman, an entrepreneur, a professor. We have mental models for every role that we play. But it's very important for us to understand what those mental models are, because some of those mental models can be supportive to our goals, and some of them can often be not so supportive. So one of the things I talk about in this chapter is some of the unlimiting and unproductive mental models that we have. And I share the research that I have conducted that kind of points to 5 different mental models that a lot of us have. One is external validation, constantly needing external validation. I frame my world around the view that I'm only valuable to myself, and I only feel good about myself if I get other people to say that I'm okay. And a lot of us have that. We've been socialized to have that need. Being a perfectionist, I gotta be perfect in everything I do. I'm sure there are hundreds of people who might be listening saying, yeah, I'm a perfectionist, and also controller, and call the person who likes to control people, circumstances, and events. Now, sometimes these mental models serve you very, very well, but I share in the book, in this chapter, how sometimes these mental models don't serve them well. For example, perfectionist mental model may serve you well in terms of getting things done, but then if you're managing people, you might be a micromanager, right? I've shared, students have shared that they tend to be a little bit more critical of their coworkers, right? They're more stressed out. They can't seem to be okay or satisfied with the work that they do. And they're constantly beating themselves up, and they're constantly spinning in their mind. So there's good sides and bad sides of these mental models. So that's what that chapter is about. And then most importantly, I share what I call 4 principles of objectivity, which are, okay, so let me just set this up just a little bit. In order to transform a mental model, you have to think about it differently, because mental models are deep-rooted ideas and beliefs about the way things are and the way things ought to be. And we form these models, as I said, I say as seen on TV. Half the time what we believe is right is because of what we've learned and what we saw on TV. So it's really important for us to be able to look at these mental models and see whether they serve us or they don't serve us. So the key to transforming mental models is actually to see them. But see, I can't say to you, Wade, I bet you're a perfectionist, Wade, and you got to change that. That mental model no longer serves you and you need to stop. I can't say that to you. I can't say that to you. I can only say to you that, Wade, a lot of people have that perfectionist mental model. You got to check out whether it serves you well or it doesn't serve you. It's really about whether these mental models are helpful to you or not. And you have to determine that. And when you determine that, sometimes you have to have new ways of thinking about the world, new knowledge, new information. It takes knowledge, information, feedback, experience to be able to transform mental models. So these principles that I'm speaking about are basic principles that I think we all know, and it's kind of, we know, but we just don't think about, that makes us really, how should I say, beat ourselves up a lot and not see things clearly. And so I go through these 4 principles of objectivity, and that's chapter 6, to help people understand and help people say, well, let me think about this differently, because that's the road for them to start transforming their mental models.
Yes. So we've gone through a ton of information so far, and we're running a little bit low on time. So I wanted to move on to the next question, which is really going to help us recap and put the whole book in a nutshell itself.
Okay.
And that's it. If the reader could only, again, you've gone through so much information, quality content with context behind it. So I think this question might be difficult, but it's if the reader could only take away one concept, principle, or action item out of your entire book, everything you've just discussed with us, what would you want that to be?
Well, you know what? Let me just say this, Wade. Let me just say really quickly, the last 2 chapters of the book are devoted to the entrepreneur.
Oh,
so I have set up the entire entrepreneur process. I've set up what our myths are about the entrepreneur, what entrepreneurs actually think about the entrepreneur process. And I've given them new ways of thinking about it, because we have mental models for entrepreneurship. And so this chapter is devoted to helping entrepreneurs see those things differently, based on research, based on the latest thinking about what it takes to be an entrepreneur, trying to help debunk some of those myths and trying to help transform some of those entrepreneurial mental models. So that's a really important chapter, that chapter. And then the last chapter, chapter 10, I've taken the business model canvas and made a objective entrepreneur's business model map. So every stage of building a business model, from unique value proposition to customers, channels and customer experience, infrastructure and resources, financial viability, financial requirements, all of that I have framed in a chart, and step by step. How does an objective entrepreneur think about each of these components of building a sustainable and repeatable business model? That's really important for your audience.
Excellent. No, I'm glad you brought that up. And did you also cover if there was just the one thing, if I was someone who I was so focused, I could only take one thing out of your entire book, what would you choose that to be?
I would say that the world is in your mind, and that we all have the power to change our minds.
Oh, wow.
And really, because it's all about how we frame our world, Wade. That's the bottom line. And as entrepreneurs, it's about how we frame our world, how we see things. And for an action that I would say to inspire an action is to begin the process of identifying your limiting and unproductive mental models, and then begin a process of rethinking and reshaping and rewiring it for a better, more successful life.
Well, you said so many quote-worthy things in that statement alone, but that's actually our next question as well. And that's, do you have a favorite quote from your book? And will you take a minute to explain what that quote means to you?
Well, that's it. The world is in your mind. That's the last chapter of the book is final thoughts, and I lay this out. The world is in your mind, and it includes how you feel about yourself. And how you feel about yourself and your fundamental beliefs about yourself often shape how you experience everything in the world. So just understand that we underestimate the power that we have and the power of our minds. And to be a successful entrepreneur today requires you grappling with your inherent subjectivity, being aware of the power of your mind, being aware that the world is in your mind and that you have the power to change the way you think, which will then change what you experience and how you experience things.
That's powerful. And we're going to put that in the show notes at the elpodcast.com. I always say that because quotes are a little bit more in depth, and I think that people love to go back and actually think and look and dwell on those a little bit more. So Elizabeth, you did a fantastic job of taking us through your book. And so I don't have any more questions about your book, but I do have a question about a book recommendation. As a book-centric podcast, we have to ask, And not just for any, we're asking for the recommendation. It doesn't have to be about business, doesn't have to be about entrepreneurship, but if there was only one book you could suggest to the listener based on the way that it's impacted your life, created a lifestyle or a paradigm shift, which book would you recommend?
I don't know the author of this book right now. I think it's Harbinger Press, but Leadership and Self-Deception.
Actually, I pulled it up right here. So Leadership and Self-Deception, by the Arbinger Institute.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, Arbinger. Yeah.
Leadership and Self-Deception, Getting Out of the Box.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's got fantastic. It's 571 reviews as of right now, today, and 4.5 stars. So it's gotten phenomenal. And it's in its second edition.
Yeah, and you know what? I used it in my objectivity class at Babson. I have used it since 2008. It's a great book, and all my students absolutely love it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that recommendation. I believe it's the first time that we've actually received that. And Elizabeth, before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our listeners to not only get more information on you, but also get more information on your book, The Objective Leader?
Well, they can go to my website, which is elizabethrthornton.com. And that's probably the best way to get more information about the concept, the book, my background, everything.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your book with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again for listening in today. If you'd like more information on Elizabeth or her book, The Objective Leader, check out the show notes at the elpodcast.com.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.